All right, we're beginning this lesson on authority, looking at Nadab and Abihu and how that they transgress the authority and the consequences of that. So Leviticus 9, let's read verse 22 down to chapter 10, verse 3. So about 6 verses or so there, but Leviticus 9, 22 to 10, 3. Who's got that for us? Go ahead, Hank.
Then Aaron lifted up his hand toward the people, blessed them, and came down from offering the sin offering, the burnt offering, and the peace offering. And Moses and Aaron went into the tabernacle of the meeting, and came out of the blessing, and came out and blessed the people. Then the glory of God appeared to all the people, and the fire came out from before the Lord had consumed the burnt offering and the fat on the altar. When all the people saw it, they shouted and fell on their faces. They had the sons of Aaron, each took his censer and put fire in it, and he incensed on it, and offered propane fire before the Lord, which he had not commanded them. So the fire went out from the Lord, and devoured them, and they died before the Lord. And Moses and Aaron, this is what the Lord spoke, saying, by those who come near me, I must be regarded as holy, and before all the people, I must be glorified. And Aaron held his peace.
Okay. If you recall earlier in the chapter, it talked about the tabernacle having been set up and everything, and this is the occasion surrounding that. They offered up the sacrifices. God consumed that sacrifice, as it mentions there at the end of chapter 9, and it's showing God's approval of what had happened. In chapter 10 then rolls right into the actions of Nadab and Abihu, what they do as a result of these things going on and their mindset and the moment, if you will. So question 1 I had asked, what were they attempting to do and why were they struck dead? What principle of authority is at play here? So what were they attempting to do?
They offered some type of strange fire.
Yeah, what was it they intended to do you believe here? Let me put it this way. Do you believe they intended to offend God?
And we see earlier in the previous chapters, what we just read, that when they followed God exactly, whether it was the tabernacle, their garments, the way they conducted their work, and offering a sacrifice to the Lord, he was very pleased with it, and he rewarded them. And they saw his glory, and they shouted. They were overcome by what they saw. Mm-hmm. Now they've done something wrong that wasn't according to what God had instructed them to do.
Right, and the picture you get from this is, in this moment, the people are shouting. It's a time of excitement. They're looking to please God. They're looking to honor God. It's not as though they're standing there thinking to themselves, well, you know what? God told us to do this, but we're not going to do that. We're going to do what we want to do. In other words, it wasn't rebellion, bitterness, anger, resentment that's motivating them here, Hank.
I always took it as they were like, well, I'm going to one up Aaron. That's what I always do. Like, he did this, let's add this to it, it would be even better. It's like, if we get a band up here, our singing will be much better.
I don't see that in this. They're taking these censers or putting fire in it. They're offering it before the Lord. Why are they struck dead? It tells us particularly in verse 1. Leviticus 10:1. Okay. Okay, so that's strange. I believe that's King James language there. Profane in the New King James. Does anybody have a different word? Unauthorized. Okay, it's unauthorized fire. So it gets right to that heart of our subject of authority. What do they have the authority to do? Now, we have to read a little bit further in the book of Leviticus to see what God had instructed on this. In Leviticus 16 and verse 12, it says that when you take the censer, you take fire from before the altar of the Lord. That is the idea of the altar of burnt offering, is where they were to get fire for the censers that they go in then and burn before the Lord. Zach, do you have something?
Yeah, just a question. Are we to assume that they didn't know it was unauthorized, or is it? Did they have knowledge of what they should have done, and going into it, they did otherwise knowingly?
Yes, but whether that was with ill intent or not ill intent is, I'm going to stand firm on the side of they were simply in the moment trying to do something to please God, and they didn't give attention to, because of what Moses says after, they didn't give attention to doing God's will in this matter. They just reached for whatever fire that was. Because chapter 16, you get fire from the altar. They got fire from somewhere else, as it says here, which he had not commanded them. So they got it from a place other than where God had commanded them to get it. Hank?
Is that censer, is that like the ash or the burning embers? The flames have already went out, right?
Well, the fire could be that, but the censer is the idea of a container that, and the incense are in it that they burn to offer up praise to God. It's associated with prayer very often. So here's the thing about it. They get this fire from somewhere else. That's the key element. God had told them where to get it. They got it somewhere else. So what's that principle of authority? They did. And when we think about authority, we think about the things we discussed before. You have various kinds of authority. You have different ways to establish authority. Where does this fall? What do you mean by that, direct authority? Okay, he made a statement, and we have that recorded in Leviticus 16. He made a statement. Here's where you get the fire from, Elaine. An example? Yeah, Aaron would have been, but this is the first occasion where they have the tabernacle set up. It's been sanctified now. This is that worship occasion where they're getting started. Aaron, maybe back before, because remember, they've been here at Mount Sinai for some time. They've been given the law. They've been given all these instructions, all the details of the tabernacle. They finally established that. They have the utensils. They have the altar set up. Everything has been worked through. And now this is the sort of the inaugural worship service at that tabernacle. And these two young men get involved, and they end up losing their life because they got fire from some other place. Zach?
We would categorize this as specific authority, which excludes all other types, like we used in the last class about the ark. What was Noah specifically told to do, namely the gopher wood, which would exclude all other types of wood. It's the same concept.
Right. Caleb?
There is also a biblical place we can go to, footnote in Exodus chapter 30, verse 9.
Mm-hmm.
You shall offer no strange incense thereon, nor burnt sacrifice, nor meat offering, and neither shall you pour drink offering thereon.
Mm-hmm.
So he tells you right there in Exodus, they weren't supposed to do that.
Okay, the Lord has given some very detailed instructions in this, they did not pay attention to that and ended up violating the authority that God had given them when He had instructed this particular fire they were to get. That excluded all other sources of fire. They're not allowed to have it. And to Gail's point, he had given a direct statement on, here's what you are to do. And they neglected to do that. That's why Moses tells Aaron, just think about this, his 2 boys have just been struck dead right in front of him. And Aaron tells him, this is what the Lord spoke, saying, by those who come near me, I must be regarded as holy. I'm holy, I'm sanctified. You cannot act toward me like you would act toward anyone else. Others, you may not pay attention to what they tell you to do, and you may get away with it, but that's not going to happen with me and what I've instructed you in the worship. And so he had to be glorified. He had to be honored. This is an occasion in the Bible where at the beginning of a system that God sets an example and He impresses it upon the minds of men. You're going to live righteously before me. You're going to follow what I tell you to follow. You're not going to get away with sin. Ananias and Sapphira is another example of that. He makes an example of them right at the beginning to let people know this is the standard and I will not tolerate deviation from it. Caesar?
Yeah, from the beginning, we learned that God is easy to give direction on how to, we can eat everything, and there are laws are the education, and always the way that he be pleased, the way that him as a God, the ultimate moral. Sometimes they like say over the head, there's disregard, no intention to go on the way that things went, but it has consequences. It's another example. It's another mini example.
Right. And in question number 2, I'd asked you, what are reasons Nadab and Abihu could have given to justify their actions? When you think about somebody saying, well, this should be okay because never said not to.
See, sometimes people look at things as an expediency, and not all expediencies are lawful. And so we may look at things that make it easier, and we alter what God had planned as a matter of an expediency or a convenience.
Right. I already have this fire right here as I'm preparing my censer. Let me just grab it. Or there's fire that's easier to get to or whatnot.
Which is where I think the phrase, the ends justify the means, comes from.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't really matter how I go about it, as long as I do the part that God said is what He wants. The how I get there is less important.
Right, John?
I could have said, we're doing this for God's glory.
Yes. We had the right motivation in it. Caleb?
Yeah, another biblical example when they were transporting the Ark of the Covenant, and David did so not with the priest that it was said to be in Scripture, transported on an ox cart, and then you get a place for somebody with his hand out, and he perished because they didn't follow the instructions.
Exactly right. Another great example of that. You think about it, these are the right people. They're priests. They were authorized to do this action, doing the right thing in offering up incense and burning of the incense in the censer. They had that desire to praise God. Hannah?
Is that similar to Matthew 7:21-23?
Yes. And what does that say? Remind us. Right. These people who say, well, we did it for you, Lord. Well, I don't recognize you because you work lawlessness. And that's exactly what Nadab and Abihu did here. Incense was the right element. The censer was the right instrument. The fire was the right element fire in and of itself. They just got it from the different source. Fire is fire, right? It would burn incense, and the fire they got no doubt burned that incense, so it worked in that sense, but God was not going to have it. And so, in spite of the fact that they felt moved to do this, God did not accept it. So, people want to try to rationalize why it's okay to do something that God has not authorized them to do. We can't get into that mindset and realize, look, when He stated this, we need to respect that. So let's press forward here. I asked you to read in 2 Corinthians 9 and 1 Corinthians chapter 16. So let's jump over there to these, 2 Corinthians chapter 9. And we're thinking about church finances and how the authority of the Lord applies to that, how we establish it, what it means for us. So 2 Corinthians 9, let's read verses 6 and 7, please. Who will grab that for us? Go ahead, Carter.
For this I say, he who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and he who sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. So let each one give as he purposes in his heart, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loves a cheerful giver.
Okay, so keep that in mind, and let's look at 1 Corinthians 16. 1 Corinthians 16, 1 and 2. Who will grab that for us? Tom?
Now concerning the collection of the saints, as I directed the churches of Galatia, so you also are to do. First day of every week, each of you put something aside and store it up, as he may prosper, so that there will be no collecting when I come.
All right. So I asked you in question 3 to read these and explain in your own words how a local church is to finance its work. Does the church need finances? Ron?
Yes. The statement I put together, Stephen, is the work is to be exclusively funded by the members through their contributions each week on the first day of the week when the church comes together, and each member is to give as they have prospered and as they have purposed in their heart.
Okay, very good. Anybody want to add or elaborate? Tom?
Just look at this as saying the source is the individual.
Mm-hmm.
Like corporate sponsor, how many different ways you can go out and raise funds. It's the individual.
Right.
It seems obvious to us, but it's a free will offering, not one that is a membership fee or a coerced because you're part of here, you have to, or else. Though, I guess in certain circumstances, if someone is consistently not giving and unable to do so, or unwilling rather, then that might create a conflict that needs to be dealt with. But in general, it's not something that the church coerces an individual to do. It's free will.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Is assembling with the saints a free will activity? Must we assemble? Okay. So in other words, the Bible teaches we need to have a certain heart, a certain attitude, and engage in certain actions with the right and proper attitude. And assembly is a part of that. And within that assembly, particularly on the first day of the week, is the giving. It's to Zach's point, it's voluntary. But if somebody says, I'm not going to do it, they have an issue with God. When they say, yeah, I've prospered, I'm not giving, I think it's just when I want to, and I'm not going to do it. There's an attitude problem within that.
And there's something else that we need to pay attention to. Is Paul was telling these people to plan ahead, think about this, and make sure it happens, so they don't get up on a Sunday morning and scrape together all the loose change and see what I have left after I paid
He wants them to get it done ahead of time so that you know what you can do. So you go back to that, what we just read in the Old Testament, where we know that was written for our instruction, our understanding. And you can see what God's expectation is for worship. There's a lot of planning put into it. The thoughts and the intents of their hearts matter. The way they dressed mattered. And exactly what they did mattered to God. So when we learn from that, we look at this, what Paul's telling us, we've got to plan ahead. We've got to be prepared. We better be dressing right, have the right attitude, and have the right heart. And we're not doing this out of guilt. We're doing it out of a sacrificial heart. This is one of the spiritual sacrifices that we're required to do, because we don't have to give a bull or a lamb or a grain offering. This is what we're required to do.
Right. And to your point there, it's a respect for the occasion. We don't treat the occasion or treat coming in the presence of God, which we are, as just another common, ordinary thing. That's why Moses told Aaron that the Lord said, I must be regarded as holy. You don't come in my presence like you would go into the presence of your friends, or you would do at work, or you would go to the ball field, or at the movies. This is a different occasion, and we need to keep in mind that it is a different occasion to have that proper attitude. And when we come together, it is a planned, intentional thing that we are doing. We're doing this individually. We're doing this collectively as we come together. And that purpose in your heart is the idea you've planned it, you've determined, and it is systematic because it's the first day of the week. That's when we do it. We prosper, we give. We prosper, we give. Any other thoughts on that?
Stephen, as we're describing that and looking at the old law, and the inverse of what we were just saying is that when we don't prepare and we don't prosper, and the problem that we realized with Israel was the things that God had determined to be sacred, they began to call them common. The things that he considered to be clean, they considered to be, in some ways, unclean. But they altered the form of worship, as you were using the example here of offering strange fire. That was an alteration to it. So the problem for us today is we also can be influenced by the world around us. And we start having, if you will, a denominational mentality towards our worship. One of the major changes that I've observed in my lifetime is this attitude to just come as you are. It doesn't matter. Just show up. Well, there's more to it, as John and you were both expounding upon. It requires preparation because we're coming before God to offer our worship to him. There's so much more to it.
Exactly. We can't treat it as just a ordinarily daily kind of thing. And that's not saying at the same time that we're coming together in some type of stiff formality and ostentatiousness. No. I think that's part of what people in the past have pushed against, like Roman Catholic formality and doing things by rote and special robes and things that are, another level of beyond, hey, I'm dressing for the occasion, it's respectful. There's a certain conduct I'm going to have in here that's going to be respectful of the occasion. I'm not going to come in here and, bring my coffee and a muffin while I'm, getting, while the service is going on. I'm not going to do that like I might do if I'm going to a business conference. I carry my coffee and my muffin in, and the first speaker, and nobody thinks anything about it because, it's just part of it. But this is different. We're here for a different reason, for different purposes.
As we talked previously, we recognize traditions that the apostles taught, and those things were sound principles. And we feel either embarrassed or that we've got to alter the course, but it's not so. God set it forth, and that's what we're striving to do, follow things according to the pattern.
Exactly right. So he's talking about this giving, principles applying to us individually, as we purpose, as we plan, we do so cheerfully, we do so liberally, and it's leaving that open to us with those terms that we make the determination. What is it that I see that I need to be doing for God to sacrifice? I need to be sacrificing. I need to be giving. Many principles in there. But the thing is, the finances, the money that's raised, is raised from the members of that congregation in a free will offering on the first day of the week. And that's done week after week after week after week. So a systematic type of thing.
And Stephen, you
Yes.
see that God wants us to give a weekly understanding and thought of the physical blessings that we have received. We look at that, we take that into consideration, and we bountifully give a portion of that back to the Lord. Those are the things that we need to be thinking about. So for saying, well, I'll just give this. Well, we're going about it the wrong way. We have to consider what we've been blessed with and take that into consideration and sacrificially give a portion of that to the Lord.
Right.
And that's what we're kind of imitating what the Jews did back in the Old Testament. This is a free will, happily giving of the blessings of God. So we're to consider those things.
Yes, exactly right. Understanding we're stewards, and we come together, and this helps to tie us together, as Ron sometimes mentions. Maybe that's where you're going.
I was, Stephen. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Touch on it, but yes, it's another form of fellowship that we have, with God financially, because He has required of us. And if we choose not to participate, we have breached that fellowship, as well as supporting the work and having fellowship with one another, as we've seen throughout the New Testament, the examples of them giving in various ways. But this is just one of those aspects of it.
Right. And just like in the Old Testament, when Moses had called the people to give in order to make the tabernacle, make the implements, they all participated in facilitating the worship together, that which they were doing jointly together. And when we give, we're financially, materially having fellowship with each other in facilitating that service to God. So I know it's a sensitive area for some people. It's a sensitive area for preachers, because sometimes people think, well, he's just doing it because, he's greedy and whatnot. But it really is a fundamental element of our relationship to each other, of our relationship to God, and of us carrying out the work that the Lord has given to us. Any other thoughts there? Caesar.
I think the essence of who we are as Christians, it kind of, we have a structure, we have a way to be God, a way to He requires from us. So from that, as we learn from the Bible, back to what we were just talking about, that example, this condition that He requires. We have to, we want to do the right way. We need to align with what that structure we have as Christians to be that ground.
Yeah, exactly. And that's in all aspects, including the financing of the work of the church. Now, I asked you in question 4 to find passages that authorize the church to work in the areas of teaching and benevolence. And then question 5 was list some specific ways a congregation may spend money for the work it's authorized to do. So let's kind of tie these two together. So some passages, and we've done this before, so I just want to hit this quickly. Teaching. Well, what's one passage that authorizes the church to teach?
Ephesians 5, 19 through 20, and Colossians 3 kind of the parallel 16 through 17, but as it's referring to how we are worshiping in song, in doing so is teaching, but that would still mean it's authorized to do. But perhaps you're thinking more along the lines, I guess, of like teaching in a high setting or teaching out into the community.
Right. Tom?
Ephesians 4:11-16.
Okay.
Equipping the saints, how do you equip them? Train, teach.
Exactly. And all those that he mentions in verse 11, the apostles, the prophets, pastors, teachers, evangelists, all that, he mentions all those are teaching roles in that context. Ron?
As we refer to the Great Commission there in Mark chapter 16, particularly, verse 15, go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature.
Okay. Yes, exactly. That Great Commission that he's given us.
Piggyback off of Ron, we also have Matthew 28:18-20. Jesus came and said unto them, saying, All power is given unto me in heaven and in earth. Go ye therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Ghost, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you, and lo, I'm with you always, even unto the end of the world. Amen.
Okay, exactly right. Let's jump to Philippians 4 and read verses 15 to 17. I tell you what, 15 to 18, please. 15 to 18. Who will get that? Philippians 4, 15 through 18. Pardon?
You Philippians know also that in the beginning of the gospel, when I departed from Macedonia, no church shared with me concerning giving and receiving, but you only. For even in Thessalonica, you sent aid once and again for my necessities. Not that I seek the gift, but I seek the fruit that abounds to your account. Indeed, I have all and abound. I am full, having received from the Epaphroditus things sent from you, a sweet-smelling aroma, an acceptable sacrifice, well-pleasing to God.
Okay, so this ties together the two things really that we're focused on right here. First of all, the teaching. And how was Philippi carrying out the teaching in this case? Monetarily supporting the Apostle Paul in the teaching he was doing. He's saying it goes to your credit. But did you notice verse 18, something he mentioned there? What does he say about what they had sent him?
Full payment, and he was well supplied.
He was well supplied. Do what? Gifts? Sweet smelling aroma. What does the ESV have there? Verse 8. Okay, this offering. This fragrant offering. So how's he describing that? And what is that? What is he actually talking about?
It's a sacrifice acceptable to God, pleasing to God.
And let's be specific. What is he referencing? Well, that's the allusion to it, but he's saying the money you sent me, how did they get that money? How is it somebody, Epaphroditus, walked up and gave Paul money? Where'd that money that Epaphroditus took from his hand, put it in Paul's hands? Where'd that come from?
It was from the collection of the saints, and he was making distribution to Paul. And it was considered the result of a sacrifice on their part to assemble this sum of money that met all of Paul's needs.
Okay. They had a congregational contribution, first day of the week, 1 Corinthians 16, being a part of the worship service, okay, because some people, they have it in their mind it's not part of the worship. Some people, and I want to tell you, I've got an issue putting a box in the foyer, drop it in, coming in and going out. Wait a second. It's a sweet smelling aroma. It's a part of the worship service, a part of that site. We offer up the sacrifice, the fruit of our lips, right? Hebrews 13. And we offer up a sacrifice when we take up a contribution. It's a sweet smelling aroma. before the Lord, that fragrant offering. It's a part of what we do in our worship to the Lord. So, having said that, let's understand the contribution is not solely for benevolent purposes. It's for the work of the church. Now, we have multiple examples in the New Testament of it being applied to benevolent situations where people are in need. But that's not the exclusive use of congregational funds. Philippians chapter 4 points that out. 2 Corinthians 11:8 says what? Second Corinthians 11, verse 8. Zach.
I robbed other churches by accepting support from them in order to serve you.
Robbed who?
Other churches of Christ.
Not people. Not, I robbed other brethren. He specifically says I robbed other churches. So understand that it was a collective purse, if you will. The money was identified as the church's money that went to Paul. So how does that happen? First day of the week, contributions taken up, church has work to do. There's some people who are poor, they need some help, so there's benevolence. Oh, there's also the work of teaching. Paul needs help in teaching. He needs to be able to focus on that, so let's send him some money to help him out in his work and labors. So it's a collective thing, because sometimes you'll run into people that want to argue, well, the only time you ever need to take up a collection is if there's saints who are in need, and if there's no saints in need, you don't need to take up a collection, and we don't need to do anything. That's not the picture painted in the New Testament. That's a skewed view of what's written there wrong.
And Stephen, isn't that inclusive in the statement that was made in there in 1 Corinthians 16 and verse 2 about, there, as he says, there'll be no collection when I come, that it's not specific to a single event, as you're describing, or a specific need. Because as we know, requirements vary, demands vary. We build it up, we pull it down, and that's what happens with the contribution, because it's not stagnant, if you will, or linear in the things that happen in this life, and the work that you're supporting, or the needs that the congregation has to meet and fulfill.
Right, and thus you have the weekly, and as the work, as it comes time to meet the needs or to execute the work that the church has been given to do, you have that there in place to do what you can. Now, there are times, perhaps, there's congregations that there's not many people, they don't have very much money, and there may be a need that arises that exceeds their ability to meet that need. And then they have to deal with it. But it's not let's all just wait and sit around till we see a very specific thing. I think that's what you're getting at, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So there's this consistent work of the church as it's carrying out its finance through the free will offering of the brethren. There are ways that can be spent. The teaching we talked about before, like a building, the PA system, things like that, paper to print things on. All that falls within that command that you can take out of the treasury of the congregation and spend it to execute that work of teaching. And if you think about a common treasury, the Acts chapter 4 talks about they sold lands and things and they laid the proceeds at the apostles' feet. That is speaking of what we would call a common treasury. Here's the thing about it. Teaching and benevolence and things like that, we want to get down to the idea of how institutional churches of Christ violated Bible authority and do violate it when they deviate from the pattern of benevolent work that's been outlined in the New Testament. It gets to this idea of authority, specific versus generic and all of that. But I know that there are people in the institutional camp, at least people who went through the controversy, lived through the main split and everything in the 40s, 50s, 60s, that they will say people like us hate orphans. Specifically told that those aunties, if an orphan showed up on their doorstep, they would slam the door in their face and make them go starve to death. Those were things like that literally said to people to prejudice their mind against people who didn't believe that the treasury could be used just to help people in the community. So they would be told they hate orphans. Now, does anybody know why the orphan home came to be like the focal point? If you back up in history, the first thing that was tried is colleges. Well, we want the churches to give to colleges, and that went over like a lead balloon. They said, well, let's get churches to help orphan homes. Well, that's an emotional appeal. Well, why shouldn't churches help orphan homes? And then somebody made the observation, and it's true, well, the orphan homes and the colleges stand or fall together. If you can give to one, you can give to the other. If you can't give to one, you can't give to the other. Because all we're talking about is human institutions engaged in certain activities. And the activities are really irrelevant. If the church can just donate money, then that's all that really matters. And if they can donate to an orphan home to help the poor little orphans, then they can donate to a college that's training preachers to go out on behalf of the brotherhood and teach the gospel. That's how it got in. Well, that's a whole other discussion. I know when I was growing up out in Colorado, there's a Rocky Mountain Christians Children's Home, I think is how it was. And Churches of Christ sent money to support that. So,
Well, Stephen, people need to understand that a child raised up in an institution isn't the same as a child being raised up in a home.
nope.
Orphans are to be taken care of. Children are to be taken care of in the home of individual people. Now, we can talk about there's no authority to give money to an institution that somebody else is going to handle. That's a violation. There's no authority for that.
Right.
But an orphan's home is not a good place to be. If you've ever gone and toured an orphan's home or been a part of one or helped an orphan's home, the children in there are not in a father and mother led home, and it's not a good thing. And the children in there never end up as Christians. If you go and look at children that come out of an orphan, like 99.99% of them never obey the gospel because it's terrible to be in one. Well, what's the answer? Well, the answer is orphans need to be in homes of loving Christians, mothers and fathers, following the example of people who've done that in years past.
Yes, exactly right. There's so many biblical principles that are violated with the practices that we're talking about, shifting off responsibility, let somebody else take care of that. Thankfully, I will say we have brethren among us, among those people that we would recognize as people serving God humbly and sincerely, that have recognized, we have the ability, we have the opportunity. We're going to adopt a child that's unwanted, bring them into our home, raise them up. I mean, my sister and I were both adopted, which makes it really strange the way that I was raised, that the argument about churches have the right to support and ought to support orphans' homes, and if they don't, they hate orphans. I just never have been able to compute that completely, but there's this prejudice that is put against people who believe what John's saying, which is the biblical pattern. The home needs to bring the child into it. And the child needs to be in a home with a mother and a father who's looking out for them, loving them, taking care of them. That's what you see in the Word of God. And then the issue of churches and their involvement in financial things is another issue, but it is related to that. So I asked in question number 6, explain why a church is not authorized to provide benevolence to members of the community. And we're just probably going to get started on this, and I want to roll through this next week and then roll into lesson 5. But does anybody have anything? Why is a congregation not authorized to just simply hand out money? You know, somebody comes up here and says, you know what, I'm on hard times, I need gas money because I'm driving from Charlotte to Columbia, South Carolina, but I figured I'd come up here and get some money from you. That's usually how it goes, by the way. Why are you here? Anyways, why would we not say, well, you know what, let's write a check, or we got the collection here, yeah, we got $100, take it and go.
Once the money is given, it's the Lord's money, and it can only be used in the Lord's way. But the examples that we have in Acts and Romans of help is they help the needy among men, they help believers, they help the poor among the Lord's people. All the examples that we have, and the only examples that we have, are Christians helping other needy Christians. Never people in the community. So, following the examples of authority that we've already studied, we can't go outside.
Okay, and I just want to clarify what John's saying there, that when he says Christians helping Christians only, he's talking about as a collective, as a congregation, they only helped Christians. Yes, individually is a different set of circumstances, but as a collective, as a congregation with the Lord's money in that common treasury that's been given for His work, that's a different occasion or different account. Hank?
Well, I take Matthew 6, 7. But when you do a charitable deed, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. That your charitable deed may be in secret, and your Father who sees it secret will reward you.
Okay, there's some principles there about the right attitude and the motivation of
we take it from the church treasury. We'll know, everybody will know what you did.
Yeah, that can be the case. What I want you to think about a little bit for our next study as we continue along these lines is, why is saints only different from faith only? Because there's an accusation that saints only is like teaching faith only. So chew on that, and we'll come back and talk about it next week, Lord willing.